Welcome to English Flow Daily. Today, you're going to discover your real English level from A1 beginner all the way to C2 near native. You don't need a grammar test. You don't need a teacher. You just need your ears and a bit of focus. In this episode, you will listen to 6 short stories. Each story is written for a different level. One story will feel easy. The next one might feel a little difficult. That feeling is not a problem. It is the map that shows you where you are right now. Listen carefully. Notice which story feels comfortable and which story starts to feel heavy for your brain. That is your level today, and also the place where real progress begins. A1 English is simple, clear, and easy to follow. If you can understand this story without effort, you are at least A1. My name is Emma. I am 24 years old. I live in a small town with my older sister. We have a cat. His name is Milo. Milo is white and very soft. I like him a lot. Our home has 2 rooms, a kitchen and a bathroom. It is small, but warm. There is a little shop near our house. Every morning, I walk to the shop and buy bread. I wake up at 6:30. I get out of bed slowly because I am still sleepy. I wash my face. I brush my teeth. Then I make breakfast. I drink warm milk and eat bread with butter. After breakfast, I take my bag and go to my class. I study at a training center near the bus station. I walk there every day. It takes 10 minutes. In class, I learn basic computer skills. I practice typing. I learn how to send emails, and I learn simple programs. My teacher is patient. She smiles a lot and helps us when we feel confused. At 12 o'clock, I eat lunch with my classmates. Sometimes I eat noodles. Sometimes I eat rice with vegetables. We sit outside under a big tree. We talk about our families and our plans for the weekend. At 3 o'clock, my class finishes. I walk home. On the way, I like to look at the sky. Some days it is blue. Some days it is gray. But it always feels calm. When I arrive home, Milo runs to the door. He meows loudly because he wants food. I give him a small bowl, and he eats happily. After that, I clean the kitchen and rest for a short time. In the evening, I cook dinner with my sister. We cut vegetables. We boil rice. We listen to soft music while we cook. Then we sit at the table and talk about our day. After dinner, I wash the dishes. Then I watch a simple TV show. Sometimes I read a short story in English. At 10 o'clock, I go to bed. Milo sleeps near my feet. I close my eyes and feel peaceful. My day is slow, but it makes me happy. If you understood this story easily, congratulations. Your English is at least A1. Now, Get ready for A2, a little richer, a little longer, and a little more connected. A2 English is a little richer and more connected. Sentences become longer, and ideas flow together. If this story feels easy to follow, your English is at least a 2. My name is Daniel, and I live in a small apartment near the river. It is not a big place, but it is comfortable for me. When I open my window in the morning, I can hear the sound of water, and sometimes the sound of birds sitting in the trees nearby. In the morning, I wake up at 7. I stretch for a few seconds. I drink a glass of water. Then I make a simple breakfast. I usually eat toast with cheese and a piece of fruit. While I eat, I listen to a short podcast to help me start the day. At 8 o'clock, I leave my apartment. I walk along the river for a few minutes before going to work. The air feels cool, and the water moves slowly. It helps me relax before the busy day begins. I work at a small travel office in the city center. My job is to answer phone calls, send emails, and help customers plan short trips. Sometimes I book hotel rooms for them. Sometimes I help them choose places to visit. I like my job because people often share their travel stories, and I enjoy listening to them. My colleagues are kind. During our lunch break, we often walk together to a small cafe around the corner. I usually order soup or a sandwich. We sit outside when the weather is nice and talk about our hobbies. One colleague loves photography, another one loves cooking, and I enjoy learning about languages. We sometimes laugh a lot because someone usually has a funny story to tell. After work, I don't go straight home. I often stop at a small grocery store to buy vegetables, bread, or fruit for the next day. Then I walk home slowly. I like watching people in the street, children playing, or families walking their dogs. When I get home, I take a quick shower and change my clothes. Then I cook dinner. I'm not a great cook, but I enjoy trying new recipes. Sometimes I make pasta, sometimes rice with chicken, and sometimes just a simple salad. After dinner, I relax. I watch a short video or practice English for 20 minutes. I use an app on my phone, and sometimes I read easy articles online. It helps me improve little by little. On weekends, my routine changes. I meet my friends in the city. We drink coffee, walk around the park, and sometimes take a short bus trip to a nearby town. If the weather is sunny, we sit by the river and enjoy the fresh air. If this story felt easy to follow, great job. Your English is at least a 2. Now, get ready for B1, where ideas become clearer, longer, and more meaningful. B1 English is more detailed, more connected, and more expressive. If you can follow the whole story and understand the message, your English is around B1 or higher. My name is Lucas, and I work as a support technician at a small electronics company. My job is to help people when their devices stop working, their screens freeze, or their programs suddenly crash. I've done this job for almost 5 years now, and even though it can be stressful sometimes, I still enjoy it. I like my work because every day feels a little different. Some mornings I fix simple problems, like a phone that won't charge, or a computer that needs a new battery. Other days, I spend hours trying to understand a strange error, the kind that appears only once and then disappears again. These problems test my patience, but when I finally find the solution, I feel proud. I start work at 8:30. When I arrive at the office, I make a cup of tea and check the list of tasks for the day. My team shares a small room with 4 desks, 2 computers, and lots of cables everywhere. It looks a little messy, but we know where everything is. My colleagues are friendly. We often help each other when things get complicated. One colleague is very fast with software issues. Another understands hardware better than anyone I know. Working together makes everything easier. I believe teamwork is one of the best parts of any job. After work, I don't go home immediately. I usually walk to a nearby lake to clear my mind. I like watching the water move slowly and listening to the sound of birds in the trees. Some days, I sit on a bench and think about ways to improve my skills. Other days, I just enjoy the quiet. When I get home, I cook something simple for dinner. I enjoy cooking because it helps me relax. While I chop vegetables or boil pasta, my thoughts slow down. After dinner, I watch something online, usually a short documentary or a video about new technology. In the evenings, I study for a small online course about computer networks. I hope to open my own repair shop one day. It's a big dream, but I believe it's possible if I keep learning step by step. On weekends, I spend more time outside. Sometimes I meet my friends at a cafe. Sometimes I take long walks in the countryside. Being in nature helps me feel calm and gives me new energy for the week ahead. If this story made sense and felt natural to you, congratulations! Your English is at least B1. Now, get ready for B2, where the stories become deeper, longer, and filled with reflections about work, life, and change. B2 English is fuller, deeper, and more reflective. If you can understand this story comfortably, your English is upper intermediate or higher. My name is Sophia, and I work as an independent event planner. For 3 years, I worked in a large company that organized conferences and business meetings. The job was stable, the office was bright, and the team was supportive. But after a while, I started to feel like I was living the same week again and again. The same tasks, the same templates, the same conversations. Everything was predictable, and slowly, I began to lose my excitement. I realized that what I loved most about event planning wasn't the paperwork or the seating charts or the budgets. It was the creativity, the feeling of turning an empty room into something meaningful, something people would remember. But in my old job, creativity was rare. Most decisions came from managers, and everything followed strict rules. One morning, while I was preparing yet another meeting with the same hotel, I felt a quiet voice inside me saying, "You need something new." The thought stayed with me all day, and by the time I went home, it was still there. That evening, I sat on my bed, looked at me calendar, and realized I didn't want the next year to look exactly like the last one. So, I made a decision that scared me. I quit my job without a perfect plan. I told myself that fear was normal and that sometimes you need to move before you feel ready. The first month of freelancing was tough. I woke up early every day, turned on my laptop, and searched for clients. I emailed small businesses, messaged local cafe, and reached out to old contacts from my previous job. Some days no one replied. Other days people liked my ideas, but didn't want to pay much. I tried to stay positive, but there were moments when I sat at my desk, feeling tired, confused, and a little lost. To stay motivated, I started learning again. I watched free workshops about planning outdoor events, read articles about design trends, and practiced using new software for layouts and lighting. I realized that being a freelancer wasn't only about talent. It was about communication, about patience, and about trusting the process even when progress felt slow. Little by little, things began to change. A small bookstore asked me to organize a reading night. A local charity wanted help with a fundraising event. And a cafe owner asked me to design a simple anniversary party. Each project was small, but each one taught me something new. My confidence grew. People started recommending me to their friends. And one afternoon, a message arrived from a company planning a medium-sized conference. They had heard about my work and wanted me to lead the entire event. I stared at the message for a long moment. My hands were cold, but my heart felt warm. It was the opportunity I had been waiting for. Planning the conference was intense. For weeks, I worked long hours, sometimes 10 or 11 a day. I met vendors, created schedules, designed the stage, and coordinated speakers from different countries. There were moments of panic, like when a speaker canceled at the last minute, or when the sound system failed during a rehearsal. But each time, I took a deep breath, focused, and solved the problem step by step. When the conference finally happened, I stood at the back of the room, watching everything unfold. People greeted each other, the lights were warm, the music was gentle, and the energy felt exactly right. At that moment, I realized that all the long nights, all the doubts, all the small failures had led to something beautiful. Now, my days look different from before. Some mornings I work from my living room with a cup of coffee. Other days I visit venues and talk to clients. I like the variety, the movement, the feeling that no 2 days are the same. There are still challenges. Of course, money is not always stable, and sometimes I miss having coworkers around me. But I've learned how to organize my time, how to stay calm when things go wrong, and how to communicate clearly even when stress is high. More importantly, I've learned something personal. Freedom doesn't come from having no problems. Freedom comes from choosing the problems you're willing to solve. And these days, I wake up feeling like the work I do matters not just to clients, but to me. If you understood this story easily, great job. Your English is upper, intermediate, or higher. Now, prepare for C1, where the language becomes more natural, more expressive, and more abstract. C1, English is more natural, more expressive, and more abstract. You will hear longer sentences, deeper reflections, and ideas that connect gently from one thought to another. If you can follow this story clearly, your English is at least C1. My name is Adrian, and I work as a team coordinator at a mid-sized software company. I've been in this role for almost 8 years now, and over time, I've learned something surprising. Managing projects is predictable. Managing people is not. Projects follow logic. You plan the steps. You calculate the risks. You measure the progress. People, on the other hand, move with emotions, motivations, and invisible pressures that you don't always see at first. I used to believe that if I understood the project perfectly, everything else would fall into place. But the truth is, a project succeeds only when the people behind it feel understood. My day usually begins before the rest of my team arrives. I like that quiet hour. The lights are soft. The office is silent. And my thoughts feel organized. I make coffee, open my laptop, and read through messages from the night before. Sometimes, a small detail in a message tells me more about a teammate's stress level than the words themselves. A rushed sentence, a missing greeting, a change in tone. These things matter more than most people realize. When the team arrives, the atmosphere shifts. There's movement, laughter, questions, and that subtle sense of purpose that fills a room when people are ready to build something together. My job isn't to control every decision. It's to create a space where people feel safe asking questions, sharing ideas, and admitting mistakes without fear. It took me years to understand that leadership is not about giving perfect answers. It's about listening without interrupting, guiding without pushing, and helping people see the strength they didn't know they had. Most problems don't appear because someone lacks skill. They appear because someone feels misunderstood, overwhelmed, or unheard. One situation I remember clearly happened 2 summers ago. Our team was preparing a major update for a client. Everything seemed fine until a developer quietly mentioned that one small function didn't behave as expected. At first, it sounded minor, but something in his voice felt tense. So we paused the meeting, took a step back, and looked deeper. Within an hour, we discovered that the small function was connected to a chain of features, and if we hadn't caught the issue early, the entire system could have failed during launch. That moment reminded me that listening is not a soft skill. It's a survival skill. Of course, not every day is dramatic. Some days are filled with long meetings, endless notes, and small decisions that most people forget after 5 minutes. But even those days teach me something. They teach me patience, perspective, and the ability to stay calm when the pressure rises around me. Outside of work, I try to disconnect completely. After so many hours of screens and conversations, my mind needs silence. I often go for walks at dusk when the sky turns a soft blue and the city becomes quieter. Walking helps me understand my own thoughts. It slows everything down. I notice the sound of footsteps, the cool air, the way lights reflect on windows. These small details remind me that life is not only about goals and deadlines, it's also about presence. I read a lot as well, mostly psychology, philosophy, and biographies. These books help me see people more clearly, including myself. Sometimes I read a sentence that feels like a mirror, showing something I knew but couldn't name. Other times, I read about someone's struggle, and it teaches me how to guide my team with more empathy. Over the years, I've learned that success is not measured only by finished tasks or completed projects. It's measured by how people grow while working together, by how they communicate more honestly, support each other more naturally, and trust one another more deeply. And perhaps the biggest lesson is this: leadership isn't about being the strongest voice in the room. It's about helping others find their voices and making sure those voices matter. If you understood this story clearly and followed the reflections without effort, your English is at least C1. Now, prepare for C2, where the language becomes softer, more elegant, and filled with subtle emotion. There is something else I've been thinking about lately, something quiet, something that sits beneath the surface of everyday life. It's the idea of direction, not the direction we choose with maps and plans, but the direction that grows inside us slowly, without noise, without announcement. For a long time, I believed direction had to feel strong, clear, confident. But I've learned that sometimes direction begins as a whisper, a gentle feeling that something in your life is ready to shift. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but softly, like the way a season changes. I notice it in small ways now, in the way certain conversations stay with me longer than others, in the way a simple moment, like walking past an open window or hearing a distant melody, makes me stop for a second and breathe more slowly. These moments feel like quiet invitations, small reminders that growth isn't always loud. I used to ignore these signals. I thought they were just passing emotions. But now I see that they are pieces of direction, the kind that doesn't push, but gently guides. Sometimes direction appears when you're resting, when you sit alone with no goal, no deadline, no pressure to produce anything. In that space, your mind becomes clearer and your heart becomes louder. You start to notice what feels heavy and what feels light, what drains you, and what quietly brings you back to life. And I think that's one of the most important lessons I've learned, that not every step needs to be forward. Some steps are sideways, some are backward, some are simply pauses, but all of them matter. All of them shape who we become. These days, when I feel unsure about my next step, I don't force an answer. I let the silence speak first. Because clarity grows in slow places, and direction often appears only when we give it room. The more I listen, the more I understand that life is not something to chase. It's something to meet, with patience, with awareness, and with the gentle courage to let the next chapter arrive in its own time. There is a moment that returns to me again and again. A moment so simple that I once ignored it, but now it feels like a quiet teacher. It was an afternoon last autumn. I was sitting on a bench in a small park near my home. The air was cool. The leaves were turning gold, and the world felt unhurried, as if time itself was breathing more slowly. People walked past me, some talking, some laughing, some moving with a kind of determination that comes from long lists and short days. I remember watching an older man feed small pieces of bread to a group of birds. He wasn't in a rush. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't thinking about the next task or the one after that. He was simply there, fully present, as if that tiny moment was enough for him. At first, it looked ordinary, but the longer I watched, the more I felt something inside me soften. There was a gentleness in the way he moved, a kind of peace that didn't come from achievement, but from attention. It made me wonder how many moments like that I had walked past without noticing. How many quiet joys I had missed, simply because I was too focused on where I thought I needed to be. Since then, I've tried to pay more attention to the small pauses in my own days. The warmth of a cup in my hands, the sound of distant traffic rising and fading, the way a single sentence in a book can open a door inside your mind. These things are tiny, almost invisible, but they hold a kind of truth that big moments often hide. And I've realized something else, that presence is not an accident. It's a practice, a returning, a choice we make again and again, even when life pulls us in 100 different directions. The more I practice it, the more I feel connected to the world around me. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet way that feels honest. A way that reminds me that meaning doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives like a soft breath, a gentle shift, a small opening in the heart that says, yes, this moment matters. When I think about the life I want to build, I don't imagine grand scenes or perfect milestones. I imagine mornings filled with calm light, conversations that feel real, and a sense of direction that grows naturally, without force, without hurry. And maybe that's what maturity is. Not having all the answers, but learning how to listen more closely to the questions. There is another thought that has been unfolding inside me, slowly, quietly, like a soft tide returning to the shore. It's the idea of connection, not just with people, but with moments and with the parts of ourselves we often forget. I used to believe connection was something that happened only in big conversations, long dinners, or shared experiences that left strong memories behind. But recently, I've begun to see connection in smaller places, places I once walked past without noticing. Last week, for example, I was standing at a bus stop. It was early evening, and the sky was turning that gentle shade between blue and gray. Around me, people were scrolling through their phones, their faces brightened by screens, their expressions unreadable. For a moment, I felt the familiar distance, the quiet space that forms between strangers who share the same air, but not the same attention. Then, a little girl standing beside her mother looked up at the sky. She pointed at a single bird flying above us, its wings catching the last bit of fading sunlight. Her eyes widened, and she whispered something to her mother, a mixture of wonder and curiosity. Her mother smiled softly, as if the world had just reminded her of something she forgot she loved. It was such a small scene, so ordinary that most people didn't even notice. But in that moment, I felt a wave of connection to the girl, to her mother, to the bird, and even to the quiet rhythm of the evening around us. It reminded me that connection doesn't always arrive through words. Sometimes it arrives through attention, through presence, through the simple act of looking up. I've been thinking about how much beauty hides in plain sight, waiting for us to slow down long enough to see it. The gentle curve of a shadow on a wall, the soft echo of footsteps on a wooden floor, the way two people laugh in the same rhythm, even though they don't realize it. These details don't change the world, but they change how the world feels. They soften the edges. They remind us that life isn't held together by the big moments alone. It's held together by the small ones, the ones that quietly anchor us, even when everything else feels uncertain. And I think that's why I try to pay attention now. Not because attention solves every problem, but because it opens a door to understanding, to empathy, to a gentler way of moving through the day. The more I pay attention, the more I feel that nothing is really separate. Not the people we pass, not the places we visit, not the thoughts that rise in the quiet parts of the night. Everything is connected, and when we slow down enough to notice, life begins to feel more complete. There is something else I've been noticing, something that feels small on the surface, but carries a quiet weight underneath. It's the way certain moments return to us long after they've passed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but gently, as if they're reminding us of who we were when we first lived them. A few nights ago, I found an old notebook while cleaning a drawer. The cover was worn, the pages slightly yellow, and the handwriting inside didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt younger, softer, full of questions I didn't know how to answer at the time. As I turned the pages, I realized how much we change without noticing, how we grow quietly in the background of our own lives. We rarely see the shifts as they happen, only when we look back and realize we no longer think the way we once did, no longer fear what we used to fear, no longer hold on to things that felt impossible to release. One sentence in the notebook caught my eye. It said, "I hope one day life feels a little lighter." I remember writing that. I remember the heaviness behind it, a heaviness that felt permanent at the time. And yet, here I was, years later, holding the same sentence, but feeling different inside. The heaviness had softened, not because everything became perfect, but because I learned how to carry things more gently, how to breathe through uncertainty, how to trust the slow rhythm of change, how to let time do the quiet work that only time can do. It made me think about how we often underestimate small progress. We look for big transformations, big signs, big turning points. But most growth doesn't look like that. Most growth is subtle, like light shifting across a room, or the way a tree grows while we're not watching. And maybe that's why reflection matters. Not to judge the past, but to honor it, to recognize the steps that brought us here, even the ones that felt uncertain, unsteady, or unfinished. These days, when I feel lost or unsure, I try to remember that notebook and the version of myself who wrote those words. I think about how she hoped for lightness and how slowly, softly, life delivered it in ways she couldn't see at the time. It reminds me that we don't always know where we are in the story. Sometimes we think we're stuck when we're actually in the middle of becoming. And that quiet thought brings a kind of peace, a peace that doesn't erase the challenges, but makes them easier to carry. See, to English sounds effortless, elegant, and deeply human. The ideas are subtle, the rhythm is gentle, and the emotions move quietly beneath the words. If you can follow this story with ease, your English is near native. My name is Lena, and in the past few years, I've learned something about life that I never understood when I was younger. I used to believe that clarity came from speed, from moving quickly, from making decisions without hesitation, from filling my days with tasks, so I wouldn't have time to doubt myself. But the older I get, the more I see that clarity doesn't live in motion. It lives in stillness. When I wake up now, I start my mornings slowly. I open the curtains, let the early light fall across the room, and listen to the soft hum of the world waking up. For a long time, I thought quiet moments were empty. Now I know they are full of signals, full of small truths, full of the thoughts we are too busy to hear during the noise of the day. I work as a consultant, but the word work feels different to me these days. It's no longer something I rush through. It feels more like a practice, an art of paying attention. Yes, there are meetings, deadlines, and logic behind every decision. But beneath all of that, there is something softer. A desire to understand the people behind the numbers, to see the fears they don't say out loud, and the hopes they carry quietly. I've come to believe that real progress doesn't happen when systems become faster. It happens when the people inside those systems begin to feel seen. You can redesign a whole structure, but if the people inside it still feel invisible, nothing truly changes. Outside of work, I write. Not to publish, not to impress, but to understand. Writing shows me the shape of my own thoughts, where they begin, where they hesitate, and where they refuse to end. Some evenings, I write about memories I thought I had forgotten, not to live in them, but to learn from them. Other evenings, I write about the future, not to predict it, but to make peace with not knowing. Lately, I've been thinking about time, not as something that passes, but as something we move through. Some moments feel wide, so wide you can breathe inside them. Other moments slip through your hands before you even notice they arrived. And I've realized that the quality of time has less to do with what we accomplish and more to do with how present we are while we live it. For many years, I believed that growth meant adding more achievements, more goals, more experiences. Now, growth feels like subtraction, the quiet art of letting go. Letting go of old expectations, old noise, old versions of myself that no longer fit who I'm becoming. We live in a world that celebrates movement and speed, achievement. But true wisdom, I think, is knowing when to pause, when to stop pushing, when to say, this is enough. Because sometimes enough is not a limit. Enough is freedom. Freedom, to me, is not doing whatever I want. It's realizing I don't need to do everything. It's the soft certainty that life doesn't have to be loud to be meaningful. It can be quiet. It can be gentle. It can be present. As I walk through my days now, I try to pay attention to the small things, the sound of footsteps on a cold morning, the warmth of tea in my hands, the way sunlight rests on a wall for just a moment before moving on. These moments don't ask for anything. They simply remind me that life is happening now, and now, and now again. If you understood this story easily, if the rhythm felt natural and the ideas felt clear, your English is near native. But remember, fluency is not a finish line. It is a way of noticing, a way of listening, a way of being present with the language as it grows with you.